It's been more than 50 years since man first ventured into outer space, some 200 miles above Earth. And since then dozens of astronauts not only repeated this achievement but even landed on the moon. Meanwhile, here on Earth, there is the deepest point, at the bottom of which only 3 men have managed to descend. This is the least explored place on Earth, which is surrounded by many mysteries. The Mariana Trench. We aren't going to scare you with mysterious stories related to creepy creatures supposedly living at the bottom of the trench, to speculate about whether the megalodon is hiding from people there, etc. We think that it is an amazing place full of surprises even without all this stuff. The underwater trench was discovered by the British research ship Challenger during the first global oceanographic expedition. That's when the deepest point of the trench, the Challenger Deep, was discovered. The Mariana Trench is not a vertical abyss. It is a crescent-shaped trench stretching 1,550 miles east of the Philippines and west of the island of Guam. The bottom area is 154,440 square miles. It could easily accommodate Belarus, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, and even leave room for Cyprus. In 1875, scientists tried to measure the depth of the Challenger Deep with a rope and a weight tied to it. The rope only lasted 4,475 nautical fathoms, 27,450 feet. Almost a century later, the Challenger 2 returned with an echo sounder and established the current depth, almost 7 miles, from the surface of the Pacific Ocean. Here is a famous example for comparison. Everest, the highest point on our planet, would be 6,889 feet below sea level if it were at the bottom of the trench. The Mariana Trench is part of a global network of troughs that have been formed as a result of ancient geological events and now cross the seafloor. The bottom of the Mariana Trench is hidden in perpetual darkness. The sun's rays do not penetrate to such depths. The temperature is only a few degrees above zero, which is close to the freezing point. The pressure in the Challenger Deep is 108.6 megapascal, about 1,072 times the normal atmospheric pressure at sea level. This is 5 times the pressure created when a bullet strikes a bulletproof object and is roughly equal to the pressure inside a polyethylene fusion reactor. Such pressure would simply compress a person, and what's more, it would make metal bend. That's why it's so hard to get down there. And only 3 people were able to reach the bottom, including the famous filmmaker James Cameron. By the way, a couple of years ago there was an article saying that in the near future an American company will conduct tours in the Mariana Trench and lower tourists to a depth of about 6 miles. However, such a pleasure costs $750,000. Not everyone can afford such entertainment, so let's return to the subject. Due to this tremendous pressure, the bottom of the Mariana Trench is covered not with sand but with slime and mud. There are mostly remains of shells and ancient plankton. As for living creatures, among the rather large variety, which is surprising at this depth, giant 4-inch amoebas, called xenophyophores, are of particular interest to science. These organisms show amazing resistance to several elements and chemicals, such as mercury, uranium, and lead. In general, those elements that would kill other animals or humans in a few minutes. There are probably many more species waiting to be discovered at the bottom. In addition, it is still unclear how such microorganisms, the extremophiles, can survive in those extreme conditions. The answer to this question will lead to breakthroughs in biomedicine and biotechnology, ultimately helping to understand how life on Earth originated. Quite possibly you know all this information since there are plenty of videos on the subject, but it was important to talk about it briefly. We refreshed your memory, and if you have watched until now, and you are still interested, then let's move on to the main part. What is at the bottom of the Mariana Trench? There are some real natural mysteries hidden here. But before that, please like this video right now. so that you don't forget to do it later. The Mariana Trench owes its enormous depth to the faulting of two tectonic plates, the Pacific Plate and the Philippine Plate. The total number of lithospheric plates is quite large, and they are divided into three categories: major, minor and micro. The two plates in question belong to the first category, with the larger Pacific Plate going under the Philippine Plate, forming a deep trench. Regions, where such geologic events have occurred, are called subduction zones. Tectonic or lithospheric plates are the outer layer of our planet, the crust on which we walk. This layer is made of broken fragments, like the shell of a broken egg. Such fragments, tectonic plates, are in constant motion, though the speed is not high, just a few inches per year. While in such motion, sometimes they join together to form a supercontinent, which remains intact for several 100 million years and then breaks apart again. These fragments then mix and move away from each other. But eventually, after another 400 to 600 million years, they are destined to join together again. The last of these supercontinents was Pangaea. It formed about 310 million years ago, and 180 million years ago it began to break up. It is estimated that the next supercontinent will form in 200 to 250 million years, which means that today we are halfway through this eternal cycle. However, this is the topic of another video. Please let me know in the comments if you are curious. Meanwhile, we are looking at the Pacific and Philippine plates that formed the Mariana Trench. Each of these plates is almost 60 miles thick, and the depth of the rift is at least 430 miles from the lowest point of the Challenger Deep. Imagine as if it were an iceberg. Man has not even been to the top. The number 7 is nothing compared to the number 430 lurking at depth. Scientists speculate that large volumes of water enter the Earth's mantle through the subduction zone. The rocks on the rift boundaries act like sponges, absorbing water and transporting it into the interior of the planet. As a result, the substance ends up at a depth of 12 to 60 miles below the seafloor. Amazingly, over the last million years, more than 79 million tons of water have entered the Earth's subsurface through this junction. Such an estimate was given by geologists from the University of Washington. What makes the Mariana Trench so thirsty? But the more important question is what happens to the water in the depths. It is believed that the water cycle is closed by volcanoes, returning water to the atmosphere in the form of water vapor during eruptions. This theory has been confirmed by previous measurements of the volume of water penetrating the mantle. Volcanoes have released approximately the same amount of water into the atmosphere as they have absorbed. However, calculations suggest that the Earth absorbs more water than it returns. And this is really strange considering that the level of the world's oceans over the past few hundred years, instead of decreasing, has risen by several inches. It is likely that conditions in the Mariana Trench are more extreme than in other parts of the planet, and more water penetrates into the subsurface through the rift in the Challenger Deep. Does the amount of water depend on the structure of the subduction zone, such as the angle of the plates bending? Scientists speculate that similar rifts exist in Alaska and Latin America. But so far man hasn't been able to find a deeper structure than the Mariana Trench. Today, it is a mystery that geologists have yet to solve. But the water lurking in the Earth's subsurface is not the last mystery of the Mariana Trench. It is the only place on the planet where carbon dioxide exists in liquid form. It is emitted by several underwater volcanoes outside the Okinawa Trough near Taiwan. At a depth of 1,360 feet in the Mariana Trench is the Daikoku volcano, which is a lake of pure sulfur in liquid form that is constantly boiling at 369 degrees Fahrenheit. 4 miles below, there are geothermal springs that release water at 842 degrees Fahrenheit. However, this water doesn't boil because the pressure exerted by the 4-mile water column prevents the process. The ocean floor of the Mariana Trench is currently less studied by man than the Moon. Probably one day, scientists will be able to find rifts deeper than the Challenger Deep, or at least investigate its structure and features. But for now, the ocean safely and carefully keeps its secrets.